Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. That was a really fantastic session that you just moderated, Dylan, and thank you to everybody who was on that panel. It was really informative. I'm incredibly excited about the discussion that I'm going to have today with Jackie Sargent, General Manager and CEO of Austin Energy. Jackie, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks, Joyce.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really great to have you here. And we're going to be getting into some really cool topics today. So, Austin Electricity recently celebrated its 125th anniversary of being a public utility. Over the years, there have been a lot of lessons learned and influential projects created. So we're going to sit down with Jackie and we're going to explore the role of public power, the importance of innovation through times of great change, and how Jackie's leadership style has morphed over time. With that, I think we should dive into the topic at hand, which is the role of public power. Jackie, can you tell us more?
Sure. Public power really stepped up and leaned in to serve communities when large investor-owned utilities focused on serving the largest cities in the country. So a lot like cooperatives brought electricity to rural areas of the country, municipalities took on the responsibility of electrifying smaller communities. Joyce, the thing that I like best about public power is that it's locally controlled and it creates value for the community. We're not beholden to shareholders that may live in another state or across the country, but rather the communities we serve, where we are able to seek stakeholder participation in various commissions, whether it's stakeholder meetings and in general policy decision making. So for example, Austin Energy includes stakeholders, community members in our generation planning and our rate setting efforts.
That's awesome. One of the other really kind of cool aspects about the role of public power and Austin Energy's role in it is that you're the nation's third largest city-owned utility. What kind of experiences can you share with us about what that's like?
Well, last year, Austin Energy celebrated 125 years of providing our customers with safe, reliable, and affordable electricity. Back in the late 1890s, we built the first dam across the Colorado River to generate electricity to serve the community. It was thought to be very innovative at the time, and it even made the cover of Scientific American magazine. Unfortunately, COVID dampened our plans to celebrate our 125th anniversary last year, but we were able to capture that very rich history in a documentary, and we'll be releasing it later this fall. And as the nation's third largest city-owned electric utility, we serve customers not only in Austin, but also in 14 surrounding communities. And our customer base has continued to grow and bring us to this point. We continue to add customers year over year.
That's really fantastic. And I mean, definitely has earned you the rightful title of the third largest public utility for sure. And what a really sweet gesture too, to have a historical look at the company over 125 years and its impact and putting it together in a documentary. I think that will be really fantastic to share. And I can't wait to check that out. With 125 years worth of legacy, right? Austin Energy has this culture of innovation. And I mean, we can't talk about innovation these days in the energy sector without talking about electric vehicles. Could you maybe share a little bit more about what you guys are doing with EVs?
Well, I'm sure that many of you recognize the name Carl Popham. And Carl is the leader of our electric vehicles and emerging technologies team. And they recently celebrated 10 years. They celebrated their 10-year anniversary when we celebrated our 125th. And there's some very unique things about Austin Energy's electric vehicle programs. And one of those is how wide the program is in its mission. And what it's really focused on is enabling people, making it easier, reducing barriers for transportation and electrification. The group or the team has over 25 initiatives, and they are based on 5 pillars of electric vehicle strategy, which include, which I really appreciate, first of all, equity, infrastructure, looking at fleets, and then outreach and training and education, and then integration with the grid. So it's a great program. We've won numerous awards, and hats off to Carl and his entire team.
Yeah, no, for sure. Definitely hats off to Carl and the team, and the T-Rex as well, right? He's pretty well known. Can you speak a little bit to, your favorite pillar a little bit more and maybe give us an example of why it is your favorite?
I think as we look historically and put into context the need to reach out to vulnerable populations or more marginalized communities, that it's really important that we have that pillar and that we look to bring electric vehicles or the other technologies, the opportunities that we have to those communities. So that's why it's very important to me. It's something I'm passionate about. Elaine Veselka was in the previous panel, and they talked about how they are using digital technologies to close that divide that we have and bring those communities along as well. So looking at equity, not just for electric vehicles or for digital strategies, but across all the programs and offerings that we as a community-owned, municipally owned public utility can do. We can be a leader in that.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it's always a very important discussion to have the difference between availability and accessibility and making sure that everybody has the right to access, things that are super critical, such as energy, right? Before we get into the next little topic of innovation, I do want to remind the audience that we do have a little bit of time for questions. So if you have anything that you want to ask Jackie, now's the time to drop stuff in the chat so that way we can get your questions answered. But moving towards green building, right? Like, so that is definitely part of the innovation conversation with climate change and all this other stuff. Can you speak a little bit more to green building and how you guys are involved?
Austin Energy launched green building in 1991, and the city of Austin created the first green building program really in the nation. We rate homes and buildings based on their energy and water efficiency and environmental friendliness and design and construction. And this framework was later used to launch the U.S. Green Building Council, which occurred in 1993. And then that led to the LEED certification program. So Austin Energy's efforts in the green building space, or AEGB, was the predecessor to LEED building certification. And Joyce, as we were talking just before we started this conversation, I was sharing that we are recently moving into our new headquarters building up in Mueller, and we're on track to be Austin Energy Green Building 5-star and LEED Platinum. So very exciting to operate in that space.
That is very exciting to operate in that space, and definitely what a fabulous achievement. And what a way to show leadership in this space as well, and not just talk about, what you can do, but actually be able to make it happen and be able to create future opportunities as well, right? Because with new buildings means new opportunities and new people. That's fantastic. So I've heard a little bit about this program, but I would love to hear, or this initiative, I'd love to hear a little bit more about Austin Shines.
Austin Shines was a project where we partnered with the Department of Energy and the TCEQ to demonstrate technical and business feasibility of pairing primarily stationary and some vehicle to grid energy storage with PV solar. We wanted to do that in collaboration with residential, commercial customers, as well as grid scale assets. So we had business models that we looked at and evaluated, and they were to have direct control over third-party aggregators, autonomous controls, and we have over 500 pages of public white paper content that's available from our website to share the lessons learned and the details of the project. But we had one aspect of that for the grid scale component is a community solar project, which we made half of that available to low income customers. We paired that with a grid scale battery at one of our substations. And then we used the Pecan Street project and had residential solar as well as battery banks. And then we had some commercial applications as well. And we had an integration system, a distributed energy resource management system with a overlay to look at how could we optimize that in the market. When's the right time to store energy, take that solar and put it into the batteries, and when's the right time to take that energy that's stored in those batteries and deliver it back to the grid. So lots of great learnings there. Unfortunately, it didn't prove out to be economically feasible at this time, but as we continue to see cost shifts change in what the wholesale market prices are and the evolution of technology, and as we see that cost of batteries and storage coming down, we have the resources necessary to take that and take advantage of that when the price points are effective.
That's really amazing stuff to hear, Jackie. The kind of collaboration that you're talking about, cross-sector, cross-organizational, getting into the nitty-gritties. I'm sure there were a lot of interesting lessons learned with that. I recently had a conversation with someone who was talking about municipal partnerships, but basically what she said is one of the things that kind of proved to be a barrier had to do with a small technical measurement of like where you would lay the fiber cables and how deep you could trench and the headaches associated with that. So I can imagine that there were lots of those little hiccups along the way. But then to be able to have the data to prove out whether or not the model was viable, and the fact that Austin Energy was willing to commit to trying to make it work, I think is really brave and awesome. And that you've got enough of a framework to be able to deploy it in a time that makes sense and know that it's going to be really effective. So I think that was, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that before. One cool thing that I have heard of, but maybe not in the same context, because when I visited Austin, I've heard of Moon Tower, but that's more of a recreational joint. But there's actually something very significant about Moon Tower. Would you be able to share more about that?
Yeah, back in 1894, 1895 timeframe, moon towers were built, and basically they are street lighting for the city or service area lighting. And so we still have some of those structures in service today. Actually, Austin is the only city in the world that still has moon towers, and we refurbish them, we maintain them. We value our roots, and in many ways we continue to lead with innovation. So these were innovation in the past. We value that, we carry that forward, and it's part of our DNA to continue to innovate. The moon towers actually became Texas state landmarks back in 1970, and they were added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1976. So some of you might recall them from a movie that Matthew McConaughey was in.
That's really awesome and very special. I mean, Austin is such a unique city to begin with, but it's what a treasure to be able to have those pieces of history still in function, and to be able to be utilized still. That's, yeah, really fantastic. I know that we have just a few more minutes of your time left, but we can't let you escape without hearing a little bit more about your journey and your personal story. There are a lot of young professionals out there who would really aspire to end up where you are, and I think that they could really learn a lot from hearing about your journey.
Well, Joyce, I started my career with an investor-owned utility in the Black Hills of South Dakota as a customer service representative. So, I like to think that customer service is in my DNA. So as that organization grew, they had acquisitions, there were some mergers, they increased their shareholder base. It was only natural for me to turn to public power, where we remain customer-driven and community-focused. My career journey was not what I'd say your typical path. I found myself divorced. I had two small children. I quickly realized that if I was going to provide for them, that I would need to get a college education. And I like to tell people to not think of career progression as a career ladder, but rather as a career lattice. Sometimes you have to take a step back, maybe take some steps sideways, and you really try to broaden your experience. And that's what I found can be helpful to take you to the next level. My career progression has certainly been that. I started in customer service. I worked in power generation, power marketing, transmission, distribution, resource planning, strategic planning, rates and regulatory affairs, and power marketing and renewables integration. And that brought me to be the Senior Vice President of Power Supply and Market Operations at Austin Energy. And from that, I went on to be the General Manager and CEO of Platte River Power Authority based in Fort Collins, Colorado. And now I can say I am in the best job of my career. Being the General Manager and CEO of Austin Energy is really, really fulfilling. It has been quite a ride. And, I'm just grateful for all the opportunities that have come my way. And in summary, I just like to encourage everyone not to let fear get in your way. Be willing to take some risks. work to expand your knowledge base. And remember, it's a career lattice, not a career ladder. Thank you, Joyce.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. We did have one quick question come in from the audience that I think definitely will help wrap this up really well. With 125 years under Austin Energy's belt, what's the next frontier for the utility?
Well, I think as we look to broaden and improve the customer experience, our customers expect more from us today than they ever have. And meeting those expectations and getting ahead of that and working together with them to build on that rich history that we have and continuing to offer programs. And I think that equity component, we talked about that earlier, Joyce, that's going to be something that's going to be really important for us to keep at the forefront of the things that we do as we continue to serve this great community.
Awesome. Well, Jackie, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate hearing more about you and your story, as well as all of the wonderful things that Austin Energy has been able to accomplish over the last 125 years, and will hopefully be able to accomplish over the next 125 years. For everybody tuning in, we have a session coming up behind us, which is going to be on building a resilient grid, planning for the future, not the past. And that one is going to be moderated by the one and only Dylan Lockwood. Thank you so much again, Jackie. We really look forward to collaborating with you again.
Sounds good. Thank you, Joyce. Appreciate it.